Chapter 3551. With that his eyes became deep, and he slowly said, "If fate allows it, we will meet again in the future. If you are still alive to find out the young master's true identity, we will definitely meet again." Boom! The heaven's gate slowly closed in front of Huang Fuzun, and those figures also disappeared behind the gate. The smile on Huang Fuzun's face slowly disappeared, replaced by solemnity and majesty. He raised his hands, and his huge sleeves rose and fell in the drizzle, extremely elegant. In the drizzle, Huang Fuzun raised his hands high in the air, his body slightly leaning forward. A deep voice overflowed from his lips that were a little white from the rain, like a chant, or the most devout prayer. Pure glass without waves, the vast golden spear leaves the dead. The fate of heaven, the knot of fate. Thousands of lives, fate rises and falls. I only hope that the soul of Wu Shang will stay in the world forever, never dispersing and never extinguishing. The heaven's gate has opened, your mission has been completed. Pass down my order, permanently close Wu Shang Palace in this world. Permanently close Wu Shang Palace. Permanently close Wu Shang Palace. The deep voice reverberated under the curtain of rain like a sacred sonata, passing to Wu Shang Palace, and even to every corner of the Cave of Chaos. Xiaoxian continent, Linglong Island. Looking at the army of the polar domain surrounding the entire island, Yu Yanran only felt cold all over, and almost fainted. She knew that Di Mingju was cold and ruthless, and had no romantic feelings for her. But no matter what, she would never have thought that this man would actually be cruel to this extent. A whole 100 years. Her heart and eyes were filled with him. For him, she rejected all men's love and pleas. For him, she waited bitterly and foolishly. But what did she get in return? Tears of despair and sadness rolled down from her eyes. At this time, Yu Yanran's heart was filled with love and hate. She really wanted to shout at this man with a heart of stone. "How can you treat me like this?" Yu Yanran didn't speak, but Huang Shouchuan roared out the words in her heart. "Di Mingju, what are you doing? My Linglong Island has pledged allegiance to the polar domain since 1,000 years ago, and the young miss has a deep affection for you. She has never done anything to let you down." Back then, when the sky collapsing calamity happened, even though she knew how dangerous it was above the hidden abyss, young miss still led the 12 exquisite guards to help without hesitation. "Is this how you repay her for treating you so well?" Di Mingju says indifferently. "Where is Li Weiran?" Huang Shouchuan's expression stiffened. He forced himself to remain calm and said, I don't understand what Juanshang is saying. There is no such person as Li Weiran on Linglong Island." Bang! A few guards and maids were thrown in front of Yu Yanran and Huang Shouchuan. Han Yi puts on a fake smile and says, "Tell me, is there a person named Li Weiran on Linglong Island?" The maids and guards trembled in fear. From time to time, he would glance at Huang Shouchuan and Yu Yanran. Just as Huang Shouchuan is about to speak, he hears Han Yi coldly say, "In front of Di Jun, whoever dares to lie will be killed without mercy." Everyone below shuddered, and the fear and hesitation on their faces intensified. Suddenly, a young maid raised her head and cried out, "Yes, young Master Li Weiran has always been living in Linglong Island's Huaqing Palace. He calls the island Lord Jiejia, and has a very high status on Linglong Island." "Slut, what nonsense are you spouting?" Huang Shouchuan's complexion greatly changed. He rushes over to give this little maid a slap. However, just as he swung his hand, Han Yi grabbed it. Chapter 3552. Han Yi coldly looks at him, his eyes full of ridicule. "Deputy Island Master Huang, didn't you say that there's no such person as Li Weiran on Linglong Island? But this little girl doesn't seem to agree with what you've said. You're in such a hurry to act. Are you planning to silence him? Go on." Han Yi looks at the little maid and says in a low voice, "As long as you're telling the truth, I guarantee that you'll live safely." The little maid is about to speak. She hears Yu Yanran choking. "Han Yu, Linglong Island has been good to you in the past. Why did you deliberately frame me in front of Di Jun?" The little girl called Han Yu isn't ashamed when she hears this. Instead, her eyes burst with intense resentment. Tears flowed from her eyes. "Li Weiran is a demon. Why did you leave him on Linglong Island? How many corpses of our sisters were buried under the flower beds of Pure Flower's palace? Ling Xiang, Sui Tsue, Ji Yu one after another. They clearly didn't do anything wrong. But because of a small matter, they made that demon unhappy. Their lives were taken away, and they became fertilizer for the flower fields. I've reported these things to Deputy Island Master Huang. But what about Deputy Island Master Huang? He just lightly said that Li Weiran was still useful to Miss, and let it go. Because we're just servants of Linglong Island. Because we're useless to Miss. Our lives can be casually sacrificed and trampled. Is that right? Since you're in cahoots with the demon and don't treat us servants as people, why should I hide it for you? Han Yu steps forward and kowtows to Di Mingju, crying as she says, Di Jun, Li Weiran was brought back to Linglong Island by Miss 10 years ago. When he first arrived, his whole body was festering beyond recognition, and his body was filled with a terrible rancid smell. But later I saw Deputy Island Master Huang find many low-level hollow immortals, and put them around Li Weiran. After one night, they all turned into dried corpses, but Li Weiran slowly recovered. At this point, Han Yu's whole body trembles, her eyes full of fear. That person has a handsome face like an elf but a demonic soul. No, he's a devil himself. Emperor, please kill him and avenge my sisters. Sob, 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 sob. Listening to Han Yu's narration, Han Yi and the others have their complexions change. Sucking other people dry to heal his own injuries. What kind of strange and cruel evil technique was this? It's not like Han Yi and Ning Mei haven't seen Li Weiran by Mu Yan's side, that white-clothed youth with red silk over his eyes. From afar, it was a young man who was as pure as a crystal. They had never imagined that it would be such a terrifying demon. If such a person were to frequently appear by Miss Jun's side, wouldn't that mean that Miss Jun and Little Master would be in danger? Heavenly Resurrection Curse. Di Mingju slowly spits out these 5 words. His face was cold, but his heart was not as calm. A supportive spell like the soul-chasing curse would not harm the harmony of the world. It wasn't like no one in the entire Xiaoxian continent had mastered it. But the Tianyin Resurrection Curse was a high-level curse. Even he only heard it from Han Chujia's mouth. Li Weiran could actually use it. At the thought of such a dangerous person appearing at Mayan's side from time to time, it's as if a ball of fire burns in his heart. Angry and restless. Chapter 3553. His cold eyes fall on Yu Yanran. Where is Li Weiran? Yu Yanran's eyes are red, and she cries in a low voice. Di Jun, you believe the words of a slave? You won't even give me a chance to explain myself? In your heart, am I really that kind of cruel and vicious woman? She cries inconsolably, her frail body on the verge of collapse. At the side, Huang Shouchuan's heart is about to break as he watches. It should be said that as long as it's a man, they wouldn't be able to help but be shaken and soft-hearted after hearing such a grievous accusation. Even Tong Huanian, who originally knew that Yu Yanran was infected with the curse, and had no good impression of her. At this moment, she can't help but reveal an unbearable expression. She looks at Di Mingju. Jun Shang, isn't there something wrong with this matter? I've watched Yanran Fairy grow up. She shouldn't have done such a thing. Perhaps she was framed by a villain. Huang Shouchuan supports Yu Yanran, and shouts angrily. I admit that the polar domain has great power. My Linglong Island can't afford to provoke you. If you want to kill, then kill. Why do you have to accuse our Miss of all kinds of crimes? Miss has always been kind-hearted since she was a child. How could she have done something like colluding with evil spirits? Di Mingju coldly watches their performance. Then he only asks one sentence. The person who sheltered Lung Yuexia and let her go to the Xiaoxian continent to hunt down Ben Jun's fiancé, was it you? Yu Yanran's tear-stained expression suddenly stiffens. Because she's too shocked, she can't hold back her aghast expression for a moment. When she comes back to her senses, she immediately realizes that things aren't good. Under the panic in her heart, the originally flawless acting naturally starts to have flaws. Di Jun, what are you saying? Why can't Yanran understand? Tianyi men has long been exterminated. Didn't Lung Yuexia die a long time ago? What does this have to do with my Linglong Island? Is someone trying to sow discord in front of you? As he speaks, Ingmei has already walked to Di Mingju's side, throwing the things he just found on the ground. Seeing the things thrown on the ground, Yu Yanran only feels her vision go black. All the blood in his body rushed to his head, and all that was left in his ears was a buzzing sound. Ingmei looked at this woman with disgust and said coldly, reporting to Junshang, "These are some unique prescriptions and furnaces found on Linglong Island that belong to Tianyi men, as well as the incantation shadow taken from the soul-chasing curse." Han Yi promptly rushes over, grabbing Ingmei's hand to take a look, his face full of worry. Junshang said that we can't be directly affected by the curse. Little Shadow, are you alright? Why didn't you call me when you found incantation shadow? Can't you just let me take it? Why are you touching this thing? Ingmei laughed and pushed his head. Her expression was both helpless and sweet. What's the difference between you taking it or me taking it? Don't worry. I'm wearing the gloves given by the Medicine King. I'll be fine. Only then does Han Yi discover that Ingmei is wearing a pair of translucent gloves that are as thin as a cicada's wings. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. When Yu Yanran saw incantation shadow, her face was ashen. She had clearly hidden that thing so well, and had used a special formation to strengthen it. How could he have been found? Di Mingju expressionlessly picks up the incantation shadow and activates it. The scene of Leng Yuexie's death very quickly appears in the void. The corners of his lips hook up, and the gaze that looks at Yu Yanran is as cold as ice. Ben Jun will ask again, where is Li Weiran? Chapter 3554. Ha 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 ha. Yu Yanran suddenly laughs madly. You're asking where Li Weiran is? Of course, he's with your beloved woman, and it's hard for them to part. Di Mingju's eyes sink coldly saying, abolish her and Huang Shouchuan's cultivation, lock them up, seal off Linglong Island, and strictly investigate everyone. Those who escape without permission kill. Those found to be involved with the curse kill. As you bid, Junshang. Di Mingju finishes speaking and turns to leave. Knowing that Li Weiran might be by Mayan's side, he can't stay a moment longer. Di Mingju, you can't go. You can't do this to me. Yu Yanran cries and pounces over, wanting to grab the hem of Di Mingju's clothes. However, before her fingers could touch the hem, Xing Lang, who has been dutifully guarding Di Mingju's side, kicks her away. Yu Yanran awkwardly climbs up from the ground, watching the man's resolute departing figure. Her beautiful face gradually distorts. Di Mingju, you will regret this. You turn a blind eye to the woman who loves you wholeheartedly, but you treat a used shoe that has long been trampled on as a treasure. Are you happy to raise another man's son? One day in the future, when that little bastard's own father comes knocking on your door, I'll see what you'll do then. Pa! Xing Lang ruthlessly kicks Yu Yanran's face, sending her flying several meters away. Her originally beautiful face is suddenly bruised and swollen, blood flowing out of her mouth and nose, looking exceptionally miserable and distressed. Xing Lang still doesn't feel relieved, fiercely glaring at the woman who dares to humiliate Junshang. Gnashing his teeth, he says, "Slut, if you dare say another word." Miss. Huang Shouchuan sees that Yu Yanran has been injured, his eyes almost splitting open. He frantically wants to rush over, but he's firmly held down. Yu Yanran raises her blood-covered face, laughing hoarsely. Ha ha ha. Di Mingju, you've ruined my Linglong Island, ruined my 1,000 years of love for you. You'll receive retribution. Very soon, you'll taste the same as me. Betrayed by the woman you love, abandoned by the person you've carefully protected, Di Mingju, very soon, you'll taste despair. At that time, you'll know that you only have yourself to blame. Ha 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 ha. Even if I die, I'll be in the underworld, listening to your painful and regretful cries. Ah. Yu Yanran's head is ruthlessly stepped on by Ingmei, and she can only let out a cry. And right now, Di Mingju's expression is so cold that it seems like it can freeze everything in this world. No, not just coldness but also ruthlessness, cruelty, and the desire to kill. Even Han Yi and the others, who have long known of Di Jun's terrifying strength, can't help but shiver when they meet such a gaze. He Jun. Ing. He. The Li Yang. You. Li. Di Mingju's expression gradually returns to normal, Soon after, his figure flashes and he disappears from where he stood. Lord! Star Wolf anxiously shouted. How can Lord go down to the lower realms without using the universe mirror? It's all this woman's fault for talking nonsense. Before leaving, Xinglang couldn't help but give Yu Yanran a ruthless kick. Han Yi coldly looks at Yu Yanran. Linglong Island Master, Deputy Island Master Huang. I'm going to abolish your cultivation now. I hope you'll forgive me. Yu Yanran's expression stiffens. Seeing Tong Huanian walking towards her, her eyes reveal fear. Chapter 3555. Just a moment ago, Yu Yanran spoke with awe-inspiring righteousness, disregarding everything. But when she truly realizes that her cultivation will be abolished, and she will become an old mortal, how could she accept this? Aunt Tong, please let me go, I beg you to let me go. Tong Huanian's eyes flash with a hint of coldness, but she still says unyieldingly, Yanran, Aunt Tong is very disappointed in you. What are you trying to do by secretly raising a monster like Li Weiran? You shouldn't have been so disrespectful to Jun Shang just now. Yu Yanran says with tears streaming down her face. Aunt Tong, I just love Jun Shang too much. I've loved him for so many years, but he fell in love with a mortal woman who already had a child. How could I accept this? Jun Shang should be matched with the best woman in the world, not with such a lowly whore. Aunt Tong, I can't accept this, I really can't accept this. Hearing her words, Tong Huanian's face shows hesitation. In fact, she also doesn't like that woman called Jun Mayan very much. She originally thought that the little master was Jun Shang's own flesh and blood, and that this woman could give birth to such an outstanding heir to the polar domain. Regarding such a lowly mother, she pinches her nose and accepts it. But now, she hears from Yu Yanran that the little boy called Jun Machin isn't Jun Shang's biological son. She doesn't know which wild man Jun Mayan gave birth to, but a vile spawn. How could this kind of fickle woman be worthy of Jun Shang? Yu Yanran moves closer to Tong Huanian, lowering her voice and choking with sobs. Aunt Tong, I don't expect to become Jun Shang's wife now. But I absolutely can't accept a woman like Jun Mayan snatching away the man I love. Aunt Tong, please help me. Let me go to the floating island to find that slut. Let me kill her with my own hands. As long as she's dead, even if Jun Shang wants to kill me, I can die in peace. The light in Tong Huanian's eyes is uncertain. On the side, Han Yi has already crippled Huang Shouchuan's cultivation. Huang Shouchuan lets out mournful howls, and eventually sprawls on the ground like a corpse. His originally gentle and refined appearance had instantly aged like a tree bark, without the slightest bit of vitality left in him. Seeing Huang Shouchuan's end, Yu Yanran is almost scared out of her wits. She cried and tugged at Tong Huanian's sleeves, begging her over and over again. Commander Tong, why aren't you making a move? Do you want me to come? Tong Huanian made up her mind in an instant and said in a deep voice, No need, I'll do it. All of you can leave. Fairy Yanran is, after all, an old acquaintance of the Emperor, and Linglong Island has a good relationship with the polar domain. Now that Yu Yanran has fallen to such a state, it's best to leave her with her last bit of dignity. Han Yi and Ying Mei frown at her. Tong Huanian put on a straight face and said, Why? You don't want to listen to me, the sect leader? Then do you still dare to disobey my orders as Jun Shang's wet nurse? Han Yi and the others look at each other, finally bowing and saying, Then we'll go out first. I request that Commander Tong do not act on your own, and go against Lord's intentions. Otherwise, none of us will be able to bear the consequences. Watching Han Yi and the others leave, only Tong Huanian, Yu Yanran, and the already semi-conscious Huang Shouchuan are left in the room. Tong Huanian says in a low voice, Tell me, how are you going to deal with Jun Mayan? How are you going to make Jun Shang change his mind? Tell me clearly, and I can spare your life. If you don't, Huang Shouchuan's end will be your end. Chapter 3556. In the desert of the chaotic Heaven Cave abode, Li Weiran casually picked up some sand and sprinkled it on his exposed arm. On the white bones, there was still fresh flesh that had not completely corroded. Once the sand fell on it, it stuck to the flesh. It even drilled into the sore on his upper arm, Just looking at it made one feel a piercing pain. However, Li Weiran did not seem to feel any pain at all. His face was filled with boredom, and from time to time, he would look at the glazed roof that had already been submerged in yellow sand. And it was at this time that an old and heavy voice spread throughout the chaotic heaven cave abode. Permanently close the Wushang Palace in this world. As the command rang out, the entire chaotic heaven cave abode began to shake violently. Everything around it gradually began to dissipate like an illusion. Li Weiran stood up, revealing a surprised expression. Wushang Palace was not unfamiliar in the Xiuxian continent. In some remote ancient ruins, there would occasionally be cultivators who mistakenly entered. In Wushang Palace, they would encounter dangers and tests. But these were usually not fatal. Once they passed the test, they would receive a great gift. It was just that these people usually had vague memories of their experiences in Wushang Palace. They could not tell what they had seen or experienced inside. And Wushang Palace was not a place that anyone could enter. Only those who were recognized by Wushang Palace had the opportunity to take the test. But Li Weiran had never heard that Wushang Palace would choose to permanently close after the test. Did the little guy do something? Or, just as he was thinking, the entire chaotic heaven cave abode finally completely collapsed and disappeared. Li Weiran only felt that the originally hot air had instantly become cool and comfortable. The tip of his nose also smelled the strong fragrance of flowers. This was the nine-tailed dragon sunflower flower field. What's going on? Why am I here? I was just being chased by a crocodile and thought I was going to die. How did I suddenly return to the flower field? I'm out of chaotic heaven cave abode? I'm saved. I'm really saved, ha 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 ha. Noises rose and fell in succession from the surroundings. These were all people who had been accidentally sucked into the chaotic heaven cave abode, but had persevered until now. Some of them were not drawn into this flower field. He had been trapped in the chaotic heaven cave for a year or two, or even longer. He almost thought that he would never be able to get out, and could only die in this hell while trembling with fear. Who would have thought that they would have the chance to return to the floating island and be reborn? Many people wept tears of joy. There were also people who immediately took out communication magic treasures to inform their close friends and family that they were still alive. The originally empty nine-tailed dragon sunflower field suddenly became very lively. But from the beginning to the end, everyone was confused as to how they got out. In an inconspicuous corner of the flower field, with a flash of light, a few figures appeared in the flower shrubs. Li Weiran's eyes flashed, and he quickly walked over. The little chick was still in a daze. He staggered around looking at everything around him. What was going on? What was going on? It was still waiting for its mother in the aisle. How did he arrive at this flower field in the blink of an eye? Where's Mom? Where's my brother? Where are the uncles? When it was done, the little chick's round eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 3557. Little Inghe stared at the people in front of him, and tears welled up in his big eyes. Gajiji. Mom. The little yellow ball plunged into Mu Yan's arms and rubbed against her desperately. Woo-woo. Mom, Mom, Mom. It was such a small ball, but Mu Yan fell down from the impact. Looking at its crying appearance, she couldn't help but feel funny. She gently touched its head. Okay, don't cry. You're already an adult, chicken. You have to learn to be independent and brave. Little Inghe lifted its head, and its little body twitched as it tried to hold back its tears. Gajiji. Gajiji. I thought Mom didn't want me anymore. Mu Yan flicked its little head. You're my stupid son. If I don't want you, what if someone stews you? Mom really thinks I'm her good son. Little Inghe grunted in satisfaction, and then rubbed against Mu Yan's fingers. After rubbing, Little Inghe looked around but didn't see Xiaobao. It couldn't help but cry, Gajiji. Mom, where's brother? Mu Yan's face darkened at the mention of Xiaobao, and worry appeared in her eyes. Xiaobao was still in a coma due to fever. She asked Qi Huang what happened, but he didn't say anything. Now, she had to find a place to settle down and treat Xiaobao. But eldest senior brother, junior sister, I'll go to the Lan Empire's palace to investigate. You guys go back to Liberty City first, Ling Yuxing suddenly said. Luo Yu said. Fifth senior brother, I'll go with you. She was really worried about the eldest senior brother's safety. Ling Yuxing shook his head. With my speed and absolute space field, I'm afraid I can't save eldest senior brother. But it's easy for me to escape alone. If you guys go, I won't be able to get away, especially you little 7. Lung Yuma nodded. Little 5 is right. Little 7, you're wanted by the state preceptor. If you go to the Lan Empire's palace now, won't you be walking into a trap? Luo Yu lowered his head listlessly. Ling Yuxing touched his head and said softly, Don't worry, eldest senior brother's soul lamp is still lit. He has a powerful half-demon body now, so he'll be fine. I will definitely find out about eldest senior brother. Luo Yu forced a smile and nodded. Mu Yan fished out a large pile of talismans, elixirs, and array discs for Ling Yuxing. Fifth senior brother, you must also be careful. I've met that Yi Qingfeng before. I think his strength has even surpassed the golden immortal realm. You can't let your guard down. Ling Yuxing nodded before turning around and leaving. The others also stepped on the colorful cloud carpet and flew to Liberty City. Mu Yan had once obtained a rainbow cloud carpet as a reward in the Tianguang ruins of the Xiuzhen continent. But in the final battle, the rainbow cloud carpet had been damaged. This one was new. She had just taken it out from floating light islands of Ichi Tower. The flying speed of the rainbow cloud carpet was extremely fast, almost 10,000 miles a day. Therefore they soon returned to Liberty City. Xiaobao. Touching his scalding skin and seeing his pained expression, Mayan is startled. How could this be? Qi Huang, what happened to Lil Bao? Seven Brilliance was silent for a while before he said, His bloodline power has awakened. Chapter 3558. Qi Huang frowns, somewhat unhappy. Didn't I say it before? Xiao Bao's biological father should be the inheritor of some special bloodline. This bloodline is very troublesome. When Xiao Bao's strength grows to a certain level, not only will there be empathy between his flesh and blood, but the talented ones will also awaken the bloodline. Once awakened, there are only two outcomes. If he survives, his strength will advance by leaps and bounds. If he doesn't, only death awaits. Mu Yan, what? Her breathing suddenly quickens and she grits her teeth. How can I help Xiao Bao survive? How would I know? Qi Huang spreads his hands. If I knew, I would have helped him awaken successfully. Mu Yan clenches her hands into fists, and her knuckles make a cracking sound. If Xiao Bao's biological father is here at this moment, she would definitely tear him to pieces. No one in this world can hurt Xiao Bao. No one can take Xiao Bao from her hands. No one. Seeing Mu Yan's figure suddenly appear in the space, Qi Huang is startled. What are you going to do? Ow! Jun Mu Yan, what are you doing? Qi Huang lets out a low cry. But he has already been grabbed by the collar. Like carrying a sack, he is carried into the book pagoda. Mu Yan says, Didn't you say that this is just a special bloodline? There are all kinds of ancient books in Tian Mo Qin's book pagoda, and there may be records about this bloodline. Qi Huang's face changes. I won't. Now that your cultivation is enough, you can find the books yourself. Before he can finish, he sees Mu Yan's cold eyes sweep over. In Wushang Palace, who wanted to strangle me? Qi Huang's expression stagnates, and after a long while he unwillingly says, Find. Do you think this sage is afraid of you? This sage just doesn't want to see the little guy be defeated by a mere bloodline. Chiu by Xia Fat Rabbit, look after Xiao Bao for me. If anyone enters the room, inform me immediately. Because Qi Huang said that Xiao Bao needs to absorb the world's vitality to resist the erosion of the bloodline, Mu Yan is left outside the space. Although the room has been surrounded by layers of arrays, Qin Jiu and Lung Yuma are guarding the room, but Mu Yan is still worried. The three little guys listen and nod, and simply run out of the space to guard Xiao Bao. They wouldn't let anyone hurt their little master. The fat rabbit moved closer to Xiao Bao, licked his burning red face, and made a whining sound. Little master, you must get well soon. After a quarter of an hour, a crisp and tender voice comes from the book pagoda in the Tian Mo Qin's space. Damn, I finally found it. Mu Yan quickly turns her head to look. On the opposite bookshelf, there was a little doll dressed in a red doo-doo. He was holding an ancient book that was about the same size as the others, and he had a relieved expression on his face. Mayan reaches out and hugs the book, bringing it back to the ground. The baby wriggles in her arms. Junmayan, what are you doing? Let me tell you, men and women should not touch each other. I will not be responsible for you. Piak. A slap landed on its chubby little butt. Stop fooling around. Little Chi Huang's body stiffened, and her round face instantly turned red. No one knew if it was because of embarrassment or anger. Junmayan, I'm warning you. This deity is an ancient artifact spirit. You dare to treat me like this. A hand gently pressed against his head. Muyan looks at him attentively and gratefully. Chapter 3559. Chi Huang, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Chi Huang's voice came to an abrupt halt. The blush on her face gradually spread to her ears. Her long eyelashes drooped, hiding the panic and joy in her eyes. Then, for once, the Lord Artifact Spirit didn't make a fuss. Instead, he sat quietly by Muyan's side. Just like that, he quietly watched as the young girl flipped through the ancient book page by page, reading back and forth, comparing it to Xiaobao's situation. Unbeknownst to him, the little toddler had already turned into a flirtatious young man in a red robe. But his brows were still so warm and soft, and he focused on the girl beside him without blinking. It was as if the person in front of him was his entire world. Li Fire bloodline? His slender fingers lightly brushed across a few words in the ancient book. The language used in this ancient book was not the common language of the cultivation continent and the floating islands. On the contrary, in the Yimwu continent, there are some remote tribes that still have records of this kind of writing. Back then, Muyan happened to know a little about it. In addition, although Chi Huang could not read words, he could resonate with the feelings of the author. Therefore, after stumbling for a while, Muyan finally understood most of the contents of the ancient book. Among them, the one that caught her attention the most was a special and rare bloodline that had been passed down from ancient times, the Fire bloodline. Those who inherited the Li Fire bloodline would usually decide their life before they stepped into the golden immortal realm. If one's talent was awe-inspiring, their bloodline would be activated, and they would enter an awakened state. The awakening was divided into 3 stages, each more dangerous than the last. However, if he could successfully awaken it, he would be able to form his godhood. Only a cultivator with a godhead can cultivate divine power. Ordinary people might not be able to cultivate divine power in their entire lives. Han Yi and Yingmei are strong enough, right? However, he could only use celestial power, not divine power. Those who possessed the Li Fire bloodline would be able to cultivate Shen power after 3 successful awakenings. This is even more heaven-defying than Mu Yan's Shen musician skill of combining the 3 powers into divine power. But was it that easy to awaken? 90% of those who inherited the Li Fire bloodline were stuck at the bloodline activation stage. They weren't talented enough, so they couldn't even reach the threshold for bloodline awakening. Therefore, after reaching adulthood, they would begin to sink into mediocrity, and their strength would even degenerate until they were even inferior to mortals. If he was lucky and activated his bloodline, would that be considered luck? No, that was the beginning of an even bigger nightmare. Every awakening was a torturous experience. Unless there was an elder who had also awakened the Li Fire bloodline guarding them, there was no way to increase their chances of surviving. Mu Yan's hands are tightly clenched into fists. She bit her lower lip so hard that it almost broke, but she didn't feel it at all. He needed a senior, who also had the Li Fire bloodline to guard him. But she didn't even know who Xiaobao's biological father was? How was he going to find an elder who had activated the bloodline? Junmayan, you don't be sad. Chi Huang was at a loss. He wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know what to say. Isn't it just the Li Fire bloodline? Even if there was no one to protect him, Xiaobao would definitely be able to survive. He's your son Junmayan. Although her words have always been Sundara looking down on Mayan. However, Chi Huang knew just how powerful and amazing the girl before him was. What was the Polar Domain Empyrean Lord? He's barely worthy of Mayan, that's all. So what if he had the Li Fire bloodline? Chapter 3560. Since ancient times, Mu Yan was the only human whom he Qi Huang was willing to be loyal to and fearless of death. Mu Yan took a deep breath and forced a smile. I'll go accompany Xiaobao. Before this, she had never thought of looking for Xiaobao's biological father. To her, he was just a stranger who brought her fear and pain, but had nothing to do with her. But now, the Li Fire bloodline had to be awakened 3 times. Even if she survived the first time, what about the second and third time? However, in the vast sea of people, she didn't even know what that man looked like. How could she find him? As soon as she got out of the space, Mu Yan was shocked. Her eyes stared at the figure sitting by the bed and she said sternly, Li Weiran, why are you here? A young man dressed in white sat by the bed. It was just that the originally spotless white silk robe was now in tatters and filth everywhere. This was especially true for his left hand. Not only was his sleeve gone, but the flesh on his entire arm was also almost completely corroded, revealing the eerie white bones inside. At this time, Li Weiran was pressing the white bone claw on Xiaobao's face. That scene was really unspeakably terrifying and strange. The 3 little ones who were guarding Xiaobao were all unconscious. Even the evil warding sword was only slightly vibrating, but it didn't make any sound. The formation outside the room didn't even have the slightest reaction. Hearing Mu Yan's voice, Li Weiran slowly turned around, revealing a slightly wronged expression. Mu Yan, I followed you all the way from the 9-tailed dragon sunflower flower field to Liberty City. Didn't you see me at all? Mu Yan walked to Xiaobao's side with a calm face, and took him from the bed into her arms. She clasped his delicate wrist to check. This pulse diagnosis made Mu Yan's expression change slightly. She suddenly looked up at Li Weiran. What did you do to Xiaobao? Li Weiran said in a daze. I didn't have time to do anything. So you really planned to do something to my son? Mu Yan's gaze was like a sharp blade for a moment. But then there was suspicion in her eyes. Qi Huang, can you sense Xiaobao's situation? Qi Huang frowned, his expression gradually becoming confused. The bloodline awakening's corrosion on the little guy has weakened. Yes. Mu Yan was puzzled because she had just detected that Xiaobao's condition had unexpectedly improved. But why? She hadn't done anything. Is it because Xiaobao survived the bloodline awakening? Mu Yan asked with a trace of expectation. However, what he got was the expected negative answer from 7 brilliance. It was obvious that it was impossible. In that ancient book, it was recorded that every time the Li Fire bloodline awakened, regardless of whether it was successful or not, and regardless of whether there was someone protecting it, it would last for at least 3 days. Not even a day had passed, so how could Xiaobao be safe and sound? So what exactly happened before? Mu Yan raised her head and looked at Li Weiran suspiciously. Li Weiran immediately raised both his hands, his face innocent. I really didn't do anything. I even saved the little fellow several times in the chaotic heaven cave abode. Mu Yan, you can't wrong me. Saying that, he also handed his left hand, that was only left with eerily white bones in front of Mu Yan. He said pitifully, You see, in order to save this kid, I suffered such a heavy injury. Mu Yan, aren't you going to treat me? Mayan frowned at him and said coldly, Li Weiran, what are you trying to do? What do you want from me? Chapter 3561. Li Weiran's icy blue eyes are bottomless, his lips slowly hooking up into a smile. Mu Yan, what do you think? What can you give me? Mu Yan, that depends on where you come from. I come from Linglong Island. The smile on Li Weiran's face deepens. Mu Yan, do you know what kind of place Linglong Island is? The owner of the island is called Yu Yanran. I heard that in the eyes of the people of Xiuxian continent, the Emperor of Polar Domain and Yanran Ferry are a match made in heaven. Mu Yan's eyes deepen. So this Yanran Ferry deliberately let you approach me? What's the purpose? Why are you telling me now? Li Weiran stands up, casually replying as he walks out. Who knows? Maybe I planned to kill you at first, but now I have something else I want. At first I wanted your life, but now I want you as a person. In this life, Dimingju and Polar Domain owe me too many things. Now, I don't want anything. I just want Dimingju to repay me with his most beloved woman. As Li Weiran walks, he carefully takes out a jade box. The jade box opens automatically, revealing a crystal clear, gently swaying dark cloud spirit flower. The moment he sees the dark cloud spirit flower, the mask on Li Weiran's face disappears, revealing a trace of indescribable gentleness. In this world, there should always be something that belongs to him, Li Weiran. When his uninjured right hand touches the door, melodious music comes from behind. A pure energy is poured into Li Weiran's body through the sound of the zither. He is slightly startled and can't help but turn around. The Tian Emochin is already in Mu Yan's hands. The slightly pale girl is expressionlessly fiddling with the strings. When Li Weiran looks over, she says lightly, "Your hand was injured to save Xiao Bao. I should heal it for you." After a pause, she sincerely says, "Thank you for saving Xiao Bao." The corner of Li Weiran's mouth slowly hooks up. The gentleness on his face doesn't fade, but it carries a trace of cherishing and childishness. The treatment lasts for an entire hour, because Li Weiran's hand is completely corroded skin and flesh. To heal him, it is equivalent to a real flesh and bones. Even though Mayan's art essence yellow had already risen to 3 stars, it was still extremely strenuous. If anyone from the sky-floating island or the Xiuxian continent were to witness this scene, they would be dumbfounded. The sound of the zither gradually stopped. Mayan's complexion is already as white as rice paper. The spiritual power in his body was almost completely consumed, and there was a burning pain in his dantian. But she gritted her teeth and persevered, because this was what she owed Li Weiran, and she had to pay him back. Li Weiran looked at his recovered arm, and then at the dark cloud spirit flower in his arms, which was swaying happily due to the music. His icy blue eyes sparkled brightly. He took a step forward and took the initiative to be friendly. "What's wrong with the little guy? Was he injured in the chaotic heaven cave abode? What spirit herbs do you need? I'll go pick them for you, okay?" Mu Yan slowly exhales and is about to answer. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept across. The door was smashed into pieces. Like the pressure of empty tie, mixed with stormy waves of killing intent, pervaded the entire room. Li Weiran's expression changed slightly, and he was about to step back. A hand suddenly clasped his neck and ruthlessly slammed him against the wall. There was a loud bang, and cracks appeared on the solid wall. Chapter 3562. Li Weiran's face turned purple, and his lips opened slightly. The dust entered his lungs, making him want to cough uncontrollably, but he couldn't even cough. But when he saw who it was and who was strangling him, Li Weiran laughed softly. A hoarse voice spits out with difficulty from between his lips and teeth. "Di Mingju, you finally found me?" Di Mingju coldly stares at him, his eyes overflowing with ridicule and cruel killing intent. "Li Weiran, don't you want to tell me your identity, as well as your grievances with the polar domain?" However, Ben Jun doesn't want to hear it. After saying that, he suddenly tightened his grip. Crack dash. The sound of bones breaking came from Li Weiran's neck. Mu Yan, who was at the side, was simply stunned by this turn of events. She didn't expect Di Mingju to suddenly come, and as soon as he arrived, he killed Li Weiran without saying a word. No, that's not right. Li Weiran wouldn't die so easily. Sure enough, the silhouette with its neck broken in Di Mingju's hands gradually seems to be dyed by ink, turning completely black. Then, it unexpectedly breaks down and collapses like gravel, ultimately dissipating into the air. Di Mingju clearly isn't surprised by this. With a wave of his hand, a weapon that looked like a saber and a sword appeared in his hand. He gently drew a line in the air. In an instant, blood spurted out from a certain spot in the void. Mu Yan seemed to hear a grunt from Li Weiran. But Di Mingju's movements don't stop, and the second sword slashes out again. However, just at this moment, a low voice, like a mocking and a curse, rings in Di Mingju's ears, causing him to abruptly freeze as he's about to swing his second sword. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Di Mingju's hand grips his weapon tightly, the blue veins on the back of his hand bulging out inch by inch. If one looked closely, one could see that his body was trembling slightly. His complexion turned pale inch by inch. Di Mingju, Di Mingju. Seeing that his condition isn't right, Mayan promptly rushes over to hold his hand. "Di Mingju, are you okay?" Did Li Weiran hurt you? Her voice stopped abruptly. His eyes met with a pair of blood-red eyes. Di Mingju's entire body is in a very strange state. It was as if he had gone berserk, as if the pain had seeped into his bones, and all his hopes had turned to dust. His crimson eyes were unfocused, as he was gradually infected by these negative emotions. The divine power in his body overflowed uncontrollably, causing the surrounding air, and even this side of the world to tremble. Mu Yan can faintly hear the sound of thunder coming from the sky outside the house. That should be a warning from the heavenly Tao, or an impending punishment. Di Mingju, what's wrong with you? Mu Yan holds his face in panic, forcing his eyes to focus on her. Di Mingju, look at me. His crimson eyes gradually turned from unfocused to focused. The faintly discernible ice blue and scarlet gradually reflected her figure. Mayan! A low and hoarse voice spills out from between his lips and teeth, like a call that has been waiting for 1,000 years. The collapse of the surrounding space disappeared. The faint sound of thunder outside the house gradually faded away. Mayan lets out a long sigh of relief, her slightly cold fingertips caressing his face. She says softly, Di Mingju, what happened? Did Li Weiran say something to you? Di Mingju suddenly reaches out and clasps her waist, fiercely pulling her into his embrace. Tightly hugging her. So tight that it's like he's itching to rub her into his own flesh and blood. Mayan can almost hear the sound of her bones being squeezed. Chapter 3563. The extremely tight embrace makes Mayan almost unable to breathe. But she can feel the uneasiness of the man next to her. So she doesn't show the slightest difference. Instead, she reaches out and hugs him. Di Mingju, no matter what Li Weiran says, don't pay attention to him. This person's mind is treacherous. Yin Yan. The man's husky voice interrupts Mayan's words. You'll never leave me? Mayan stares blankly, then reveals a helpless and doting smile. Yes, I'll never leave you. If Xiao Bao's biological father comes looking for you, you won't choose him? Mayan frowns. What's going on? How come that bastard man has come out recently to make his presence known? Qi Huang has repeatedly mentioned Xiao Bao's Li Fire bloodline. How come even Di Mingju is entangled now? Don't say that she doesn't even know who that bastard man is. Even if she knows who he is, wouldn't it be too late to kill him? What do you mean choose him? In your dreams. Mayan sighs softly, breaks free from Di Mingju's embrace, and is about to speak. But he firmly presses her into his arms again. The man's voice is hoarse and dark. For the first time, there's no gentleness and doting, only fierce jealousy and murderous intent. Yin Yan, no matter what, I won't let you leave. From the moment you agreed to be my wife, you belong to me. Only to me. Mayan stares blankly, and is about to speak. But she feels her body loosen, and Di Mingju has already disappeared. Di Mingju. The room is empty. There's no sign of Di Mingju. Mayan's heart surges with an inexplicable sense of loss and fear. What happened just now? Or, what did Li Weiran say to Di Mingju that caused the always calm man to lose control like this? No, she can't leave Di Mingju like this. Mayan is about to use the void spirit ring to find Di Mingju. Suddenly, Nyangqin. Daddy. A low, weak and pained voice comes from the bed. Mayan is startled, and quickly goes to the bed. She carefully picks up Xiao Bao. In just a short moment, Xiao Bao's little face is flushed red again. The most alarming thing is that there's a faint black aura around his temples and eyebrows. Qi Huang, what's going on? Seven Brilliance, who was in the space, was also confused. I'm not sure either. There were clearly signs of improvement just now. Xiao Bao opens his eyes in a daze and sees Mu Yan. His blurred eyes burst with a bright light. Mother. Little treasure, be good. Mother is here. Xiao Bao's head moved with difficulty as he looked around. When he didn't see the familiar figure, his ice blue eyes revealed a trace of disappointment. With a slightly hoarse and tender voice he said, I heard Daddy's voice just now. So, I heard wrong. Mu Yan promptly said. Xiao Bao didn't hear wrongly. Daddy came, but he had to leave first. Little Treasure's eyes lit up, but then they couldn't help but dim. His lips, which had been burned dry and cracked, were slightly pursed. A trace of disappointment and grievance appeared on her face. Daddy was here. Why didn't he hug him? He was sick and in so much pain, but his father didn't even look at him and left. Did his father really not want him anymore? Xiaobao blinked and tried his best to hold it in. Chapter 3564. At this moment, her body was in so much pain that she could no longer hold back her tears, and they fell from the corner of her eyes. Mother, does father not want Xiaobao anymore? Mu Yan sees him shedding tears of sadness, and only feels her heart throbbing with pain. She carefully wiped away the tears at the corners of Xiaobao's eyes and said softly, "Silly, Daddy loves Xiaobao so much. How could he not want you?" Xiaobao tilts his body slightly and buries his face in Mayan's arms. His small body trembled slightly because of the pain. Seeing this, Mayan felt an indescribable heartache. She only wished that she could bear these sufferings for him. However, what pained him even more was what Xiaobao said next. "I dreamt that Daddy doesn't want me anymore." He said that Xiaobao isn't his flesh and blood, and told Xiaobao to leave with his biological father. There are also many people who say that little Bao is not Daddy's child. So how can he stay in the polar domain? They said that Daddy will have his own flesh and blood in the future. If little Treasure stayed in the polar domain, he would only be a disgrace to Daddy. Xiaobao raises his head and looks at Mu Yan. His flushed little face is already covered in tears. Why do they all say that Xiaobao can't stay in the polar domain and can't stay with Daddy and Mommy? Just because Xiaobao isn't Daddy's flesh and blood? Mother, why does Xiaobao have a biological father? Xiaobao doesn't want to go with him. Xiaobao only wants Daddy and Mommy. The child could no longer hold back his sobs, and a sob escaped from his mouth. Xiaobao had always matured early. Other children might not understand, but Xiaobao could understand since he was very young. When he was sent to the polar domain, others always treat him as Di Mingju's own son. They looked at him with admiration, gratification, and reverence. However, what if these people knew that he was not his father's flesh and blood? Would they still be this happy? Would they think that he was the dove occupying the magpie's nest, and that he had no right to stay by his father's side? Xiaobao knew of these fears and grievances, but he had always buried them deep in his heart. He doesn't want Mayan to feel sad, and he also doesn't want Di Mingju to be angry. But at this moment, his willpower was weakened by his illness. The sadness, fear, and grievances finally erupted along with the physical pain. Actually, he wanted to ask, "Mother, why is father not Xiaobao's biological father?" Even though he was still at such an ignorant age, even though he was currently in a coma due to illness, Xiaobao also instinctively knows that asking such a question will make Mayan sad. The best mother in the world. Xiaobao swore to protect his mother. So how could he say anything that would upset his mother? Mayan feels as if her throat is being choked by something. She looked at Xiaobao's sorrowful and aggrieved expression, and an unprecedented pain and hatred welled up in her heart. The man who had changed her fate for 2 lifetimes in the cave with a burning passion and madness. Even if she knew in her previous life that the child in her womb had been dug out and refined into a pill, she had never hated him. But at this moment, when she saw how stubbornly Xiaobao was enduring, she couldn't hold back her tears. Mu Yan's heart surged with uncontrollable resentment and hatred. The cave was dark and hot. At that time, she was just a mortal and couldn't see the man in front of her clearly. She couldn't even hear his voice. But that man could see her clearly. Even after 2 lifetimes, she could still remember the man's hoarse voice ringing in her ears over and over again. "You are mine." But in the blink of an eye, she wakes up from the dream, and she appears in the valley, her clothes disheveled. Chapter 3565. There was no cave, no bone-piercing heat, and no strange, powerful man. Everything was like a real dream. The man appeared and disappeared. The promises they made in the past, the oaths and curses that rang in their ears over and over again, also vanished into thin air. He patted his butt and disappeared without a trace. But it left her with a scar that could never be healed in 2 lifetimes. Now, this scar had been passed on to her beloved son. Mu Yan took a deep breath, concealing the surging emotions in his heart, and the hint of scarlet that leaked out from the corner of his eyes. She lowered her eyes and gently kissed the space between Xiaobao's eyebrows. She said in a soft voice, "Xiaobao, You are the person that mother loves most in this world. Xiaobao's gloomy and sad eyes lit up slightly. You are mother's most important treasure. This has nothing to do with whose flesh and blood you are, or whose child you will become in the future. Xiaobao's long eyelashes fluttered. She couldn't help but reach out her small hand and pinch Mayan's finger. She clutched him tightly with her burning palms. If father doesn't want Xiaobao anymore, will Xiaobao still be mother's darling? Of course. Mu Yan gently caresses his little face, her voice so gentle that it could drip water. Xiaobao doesn't believe what Nyangqin said. Little Treasure hurriedly shook his head, then nodded lightly. His trembling body seemed to have calmed down. There's a trace of bashful happiness in the corners of his eyes. Xiaobao believes in Nyangqin. Mayan continued. What's more, Daddy is so good to Xiaobao. What did it matter whether he was Xiaobao's biological father or not? What do other people say and comment have to do with us? As long as Xiaobao believes that Daddy loves you, and that our family will be together forever, that's enough. Or could it be that Xiaobao believes in mother and doesn't believe in father? Xiaobao is so anxious that he squeezes Mayan's fingers a bit harder. Xiaobao believes in Daddy. But what was it? He just felt that his father loved his mother so much almost to the bone. Just like Uncle Han Yi and the others said, in the future, Daddy and Nyangqin will get married, and Nyangqin will become the mistress of the polar domain. Then mother and father may give birth to a child who truly had his father's flesh and blood flowing in his veins. A child who had the qualifications to become the successor of the polar domain. Everything was wonderful, but he was the only one who was unnecessary. If he didn't exist, father and mother would definitely be happier. Mu Yan seems to have seen through Xiaobao's thoughts. She gently caresses his forehead and softly says, Xiaobao, do you still remember what Daddy said to you at the top of Danyang Mountain? On the peak of Danyang Mountain? Xiaobao was stunned. His little head was dizzy from the fever, and for a moment, he couldn't remember where Danyang Mountain was. After a long while, he finally remembered. Danyang Mountain was near the Hellflame Valley of the Cultivation Continent. At that time, mother and father were originally going to tie the marriage contract. But who knew that there would be an unforeseen event, and her father would leave in anger. At that time, Xiaobao thought that his father was going to abandon him and his mother. In his heart, he felt that he and his mother were being betrayed. He was angry and sad at the same time. He even swore that he would never talk to his father again. Then his father brought him to the peak of Danyang Mountain. What did he say to him? A scene from a long time ago appeared before his eyes. For the first time, the man who was always high and mighty, cold and aloof, the man whom she unconsciously worshipped, revealed a depressed and unconfident expression. He said, It's not that Daddy doesn't want you and Nyangqin. Daddy is just afraid. The error-free chapter of Alluring Enchantress of the Cities, a heaven-defying baby's black-bellied father, will continue to be updated on Handplay Bar. There are no advertisements on the site. Everyone please collect and recommend Handplay Bar. If you like Alluring Enchantress of the Cities, a heaven-defying baby's black-bellied father, please collect. Chapter 3566. You were afraid that your mother would marry another man. I'm also afraid that Xiaobao will think that it's better to let someone else be your father. Little Treasure opened his mouth slightly. He remembered everything. Mu Yan chuckled softly and said, Xiaobao believes in Nyangqin, but he isn't willing to completely believe in Daddy. Father might be afraid again. That would be too pitiful for your father, wouldn't it? Xiaobao's long eyelashes fluttered. The lack of confidence in his eyes suddenly vanished completely at this moment. He buries his head in Mayan's arms and gently rubs it. Father was afraid that Xiaobao would think that someone else would be a better father. How could Daddy be so stupid? How could he be afraid of such a thing? In Xiaobao's heart, there was no father better than his father. The corners of Xiaoxiao's lips curled up secretly. Recalling that memory, not only did Xiaobao not feel aggrieved, but he also felt sad. On the contrary, it was as if he was carrying a small precious secret, and he couldn't help but feel happy. That was a father that no one else knew. Only he and his mother knew. Mu Yan sees Xiaobao's sparkling eyes and the smile at the corner of his mouth, and her tightened heart finally relaxes. She reaches out to pluck the Tianmo, softly saying, Xiaobao's current illness can only be overcome by relying on his own willpower. Xiaobao has to get better quickly. Don't let daddy and mommy worry, okay? Xiaobao nods, slowly closing his eyes amidst the sound of the Tianmo. As time passed, the black qi between his eyebrows and temples began to dissipate. Although the Shun musician's skill, mist dispersing clouds, cannot protect the awakening of the bloodline, it can alleviate Xiaobao's pain to a certain extent. As Mu Yan plays the zither, she lets out a long sigh of relief. But then, he couldn't help but look out of the window. The void spirit ring shone faintly. Di Mingju, what are you doing? Why don't you come back to me and Xiaobao? In the Tianmo space. Because it had greedily eaten too much energy from a single spark making a prairie. The golden crow fire essence had been in a deep slumber. At this time, the energy was finally digested. He stretched and let out a comfortable sigh. He turned around and looked into the space. Huh. The hateful rabbit was not here. And neither was the black-hearted sword spirit. Only Little Phoenix and Little Chick were the easiest to bully. The golden crow's single eye rolled as it thought of the two little fellows who had followed the fat rabbit to bully it. It was immediately filled with rage. His chubbier body trembled. Casually shaking off the two flames, they flew towards Little Phoenix and Little Chick. Little Phoenix was very close. Seeing a round red object flying in front of him, he subconsciously opened his mouth wide and swallowed it. In an instant, a burning pain spread from her mouth to her abdomen, causing her to let out a blood-curdling scream. The little chick wasn't stupid enough to swallow it. Instead, it flapped its wings like it was chasing away a fly. However, this was like poking a hornet's nest. When the yellow wings came into contact with the sparks, they burst into flames. It hurts, it hurts. Woo woo woo. This was the little phoenix's aggrieved cry. Mom, big brother, save me. Fire. Mu Yan, who's in the middle of taking care of Xiaobao, comes back to her senses. Seeing the scene that's happening inside the Tianmo space, she's startled. He hurriedly entered the space, picked up the little chick, and extinguished the flames on its body. Naturally, the fireball cast by the golden crow fire essence couldn't be easily extinguished. But there was a master-servant contract between Mu Yan and the golden crow. Chapter 3567. Naturally, it wasn't afraid of its flames. The fire on the little chick's body was extinguished. Mu Yan turned to look at the little phoenix. She watched as it opened its mouth, revealing its blistered throat. Mu Yan felt a wave of heartache. She gently rubbed the little phoenix's head to comfort it. As for treatment, there was no need. The little phoenix was of the fire attribute, and it was a rare fire spirit body. However, the level of the golden crow fire was much higher than it was at its infancy. That was why it was burned. But it would be fine after a while. Absorbing that ball of golden crow fire was actually beneficial to it. The little chick looked dazedly at its bare wings that had been burned. After a while it started to cry. The cry was heart-wrenching, and anyone who heard it would cry. Even when Mu Yan hugged it and comforted it, letting it play in the amusement park as compensation, the little fellow didn't stop crying. Gigi burp, goo goo burp. Woo, Huang Huang didn't have beautiful wings. It was no longer its mother's favorite chicken son. A bald chicken had no future. Huang Huang wouldn't be able to marry a beautiful chicken wife in the future. Woo, Huang Huang didn't want to live anymore. Even with Mu Yan's heart full of worry, she almost burst out laughing at this stupid chicken son. What fucking chicken wife? Was this really the young master of Wushang Palace? Was Huang Fuzun out of his mind? Did he mistake his stupid chicken for their young master? Huang Huang, who had been sobbing, seemed to suddenly think of something. With a shout, it suddenly charged at the golden crow. Ada! Gulyalu! Beak you! Bully Huang Huang bad guy! A strange cry accompanied the little chicken claw, as it slapped at the golden crow's single eye. A trace of disdain flashed through the golden crow's eyes. The dead rabbit and black heart sword weren't here. You think this fire spirit is afraid of a stupid chicken? But the next moment, a chicken claw slammed into the golden crow's head, causing it to roll several times on the ground. Its single eye was full of mosquito coils. The little chick landed handsomely, even turning a circle. Then it showed a satisfied smile. Guji. Bad fire, bully Huang Huang. Bully Chiu Chiu. I'll beat you to death. Mayan picked up the smug little chick and slowly walked to the golden crow fire essence. Just as he was about to speak, his gaze suddenly focused on the golden crow's side. A piece of vermilion jade had unknowingly fallen there. Mu Yan felt that it was familiar at first glance, as if she had seen it somewhere before. She subconsciously walked forward and bent down to pick up the jade. The golden crow fire essence on the ground had just been beaten into a sorry state by the little chick, and it had lost all its face. She was throwing a tantrum. They had clearly teamed up with the dead rabbit and Blackheart Sword to bully it first. Why did Master have to side with these stinking bastards? Unfair. Unless its master fed it more pure fire energy, it wouldn't be satisfied. Just as he's fantasizing about how much fire energy he can extort this time, he catches a glimpse of Mu Yan picking up the vermilion jade from the corner of his eye. The single eye that was rolling around suddenly widened. Wait a minute. Wasn't that the jade he stole from the fat rabbit? Could it be that Master knew this piece of jade? Was its theft going to be exposed? Mu Yan stares blankly at the jade in her hand for a good while. She really felt that this piece of jade was very familiar, but for a while, she couldn't remember where she had seen it. Moreover, when she held the jade, Mu Yan had an indescribable feeling. It was like the blood and soul in her body would resonate with it. Chapter 3568. Huh? Qi Huang's curious voice sounded in his ear. Is this your demon blood core jade? When he got closer and took another look, he said suspiciously, That's not right. I don't sense your aura on it. But it seems to have some connection with you. Could it be that your parents left it for you? Mu Yan's eyes suddenly widened, an incredulous light bursting from the bottom of her eyes. She looked at Qi Huang in a daze. You said that my parents left this for me? Yeah. Demon core blood jade was something that could only be condensed by high-grade demons. It was not very useful, and was mainly used to find and identify bones and blood. This was because it was difficult for demons, especially high-level demons, to give birth. Hey, Junmayan, are you okay? Why do you look so pale? Qi Huang is halfway through his sentence when he discovers that Mayan's complexion is already deathly white like a sheet of paper. He jumps up in fright. He stretched out his hand to support her, but then he hesitantly withdrew it. However, there was an unconcealable worry in his eyes. What's going on? Is there a problem with this demon core blood jade? Mayan is silent for a good while. Then she slowly says, Do you still remember that I once said that when my father brought me back to the Yinwu continent and handed me over to my adoptive father to raise, there was only a tattered swaddling cloth on my body? Seven Brilliance nodded. He had also searched for the swaddling cloth with her. Mu Yan continues. But in fact, besides the swaddling clothes, I also have a piece of vermilion jade. It's just that this piece of vermilion jade was lost a long, long time ago, so I treated it as if it never existed. Qi Huang, that's the magic core blood jade. Isn't it a good thing that we found it? Mu Yan closes her eyes. After a long while, she says in a low voice, Do you know where this piece of vermilion jade was lost? Just as Qi Huang was about to ask, Where? He suddenly discovers that Mayan's lips are deathly pale, but her eyes seem to be burning with raging flames. It was pain, unwillingness, resentment, and blurred memories, but also a trace of hope. At this moment, the person in front of him was no longer the invincible Shun musician, the Lord of Liberty City, revered by tens of thousands. She was just a weak, helpless girl. After a long time, Qi Huang heard her soft voice, as if it was about to be blown away by the wind. In the place where I was pregnant with Xiaobao, Seven Brilliance's pupil shrank. In an instant, her beautiful black phoenix eyes seemed to be dyed with a bloodthirsty scarlet, but it quietly disappeared. Mu Yan turns around to look at the golden crow. She pinches the flow of the vermilion jade and dangles it upside down in front of its single eye. Word by word, he asked in a cold voice, Where did you get this jade? The golden crow shrank back instinctively. The whole fire was trembling. It's over, it's over. Master is so scary. If it said that it came from the dead rabbit, would its master kill it? Even if he didn't kill it, he would definitely freeze it forever. Let it no longer feel warm. Weep, weep, weep. It doesn't want. The fat fireball swayed, and Jinwoo carefully transmitted its consciousness to Mu Yen. This is what I picked up. I picked it up near Liberty City recently. That's right, I picked him up. The night was thick, and not a sound could be heard. In a private room on the west side of the mayor's residence of Liberty City, however, candles were still ablaze. Luo Yu yawned as she passed by, and took a look inside. Seeing the easels and the strange paintings of mountains of corpses and seas of blood all over the room, she shuddered. She almost woke up from the drowsiness in her head. Chapter 3569. Third brother. It's already so late. Why aren't you sleeping? Chu Moli, who was drawing, looked back at him and smiled warmly. Do you want to come in and admire my painting? No. Luo Yu shook his head repeatedly. I'm afraid I'll have nightmares at night. He yawned as he closed the door. Before leaving, he didn't forget to remind him. Third brother, don't stay up too late. If you overwork your body, I'll complain to sixth sister. Only when the door was closed and Luo Yu's footsteps grew distant did Chu Moli smile faintly. He picked up his brush again, and returned to the painting in front of him. At this time, a white figure slowly appeared behind an easel that was as tall as a person in the northeast corner of the room. If Mayan was here at this time, she would definitely cry out in alarm, because this person was Li Weiran. But compared to the previous white as snow, the elegant gentleman, the current Li Weiran could be said to be battered and exhausted. More than half of his white clothes were already soaked in blood. There were clear bruises on his neck. It looked as if a rope had forcibly broken his beautiful neck. But the most shocking thing was the wound on his abdomen. There was a crackling flash of lightning, and then a gurgling of blood. Even if Li Weiran kept sprinkling medicinal powder on the wound, the blood wouldn't stop. Chu Moli didn't seem to notice that there was someone in the room. His gaze still focused on the drawing. He held the brush horizontally in front of him, measuring it up and down, as if to determine where to draw next. The medicine that little junior sister gave you is on the cabinet on your left. You can try if it doesn't work. I have no other way. Li Weiran turned and took out a bottle of medicine from the cabinet. He didn't even look at it before sprinkling it on his wound. Strangely, the wound that had been bleeding profusely had actually healed a little. Li Weiran let out a long sigh, as if he was sighing. As expected of the emperor of the polar domain, the only emperor of the Xiaoxian continent. It was just a simple strike, but it had caused him serious injuries. But as he said that, he suddenly laughed lowly. At this moment, the handsome and pale face became coquettish and ferocious, beautiful and twisted. It was as if all the contradictions and depravity of human nature were concentrated on him at this moment. Unfortunately, he will soon be beyond redemption. Chu Moli helplessly put down his brush and turned his wheelchair to face Li Weiran. He said with great interest, I'm very curious. What kind of grudge do you have with Instructor Mo? I mean the polar domain monarch, that would make you use every possible method and scheme to kill him. Li Weiran slowly walked to the side of the table and poured himself a cup of tea. He brought it to his lips and took a sip. The story is actually very simple. A few hundred years ago, the previous emperor of the polar domain happened to pick up a beautiful woman who had lost all her memories in the savage land of the Xiaoxian continent. The flirtatious and affectionate Emperor Luo soon got his hands on this woman, and the two of them lived together for a few years. It's just that the extreme domain's sovereign lord is an immortal venerate, just a step away from a mortal emperor. He had lived for tens of millions of years, had the supreme status of the polar domain king, and had beautiful wives and concubines raised in the polar domain imperial court. But that woman was only a mortal without any cultivation. In a few short years, she grew old and lost her beauty, so she was abandoned. Li Weiran drank the tea in one gulp. His expression and tone were incomparably calm, as if he was narrating a story that had nothing to do with him. Chapter 3570. It's easy for an immortal reverend to abandon a mortal woman, and for a mortal woman to find her immortal husband. Oh no, lover. That was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. She couldn't even enter the gates of the polar domain. 3 months after being abandoned, the woman found out she was pregnant. She was ecstatic, thinking that as long as she gave birth to the child, the polar domain emperor would definitely change his mind. However, the child she gave birth to was still a mortal who couldn't cultivate, a piece of trash. The polar domain emperor already had an outstanding son, a publicly recognized future successor. Sending such a trash son would only be humiliating himself. But the woman wasn't satisfied. She plotted and even sold her body to sneak into the polar domain imperial court. Then, she appeared in front of the emperor and excitedly told him, "Beixian, I am Qianqian, I brought our son to see you." Speaking of this scene, Li Weiran seemed to have said an interesting joke. The corner of his mouth curved up high, as if he was going to laugh out loud in the next moment. How could there be such a stupid woman in the world? Li Weiran seemed to be evaluating an unrelated outsider, with a teasing and careless tone. A mistress who couldn't see the light, a useless son who didn't have the slightest bit of value, came looking for her so eagerly? Did she really think that she could wait for the polar domain emperor's guilt and pity? Haha, how is that possible? What she waited for was mercilessly being chased out of the polar domain imperial court. And what she waited for was the cruel revenge of the polar domain divine empress. Then she died. Before she died, she was still dreaming of a man changing his mind and bringing her back to the polar domain in glory. And her child, the boy who didn't have the slightest bit of talent for cultivation, was sold to the dirtiest place in the world. Chu Moli nodded. It was quite pitiful. So you are that boy. The polar domain emperor is Instructor Mo's father. And the two of you are half-brothers? Brother. Li Weiran's voice suddenly rose. When he said that he was sold to the dirtiest place in the world, his face didn't change at all. But at this moment, his eyes shot out malicious hatred. No, how could he be my brother? Bai Xingwei died a long time ago, and Di Beixian went missing. He was the only one I could vent my hatred on. Only when I see Di Mingju lose everything with my own eyes, when he's in so much pain that he doesn't want to live, can I find relief. For so many years, I've always been thinking about how to destroy the polar domain, how to consign Di Mingju to eternal damnation. I've finally found a way. Chu Moli lightly clapped his hands and said with a faint smile, "Congratulations on getting your wish fulfilled. However, I'm still a little curious. With Instructor Mo's cultivation, how are you going to make him lose everything and suffer so much that he wishes he were dead?" Li Weiran's face had already regained its composure. He picks up the cup and gently takes a sip. I told him that I am Xiao Bao's biological father, and also Mayan's first man. Chu Moli stared blankly for a moment. A rare expression of astonishment appeared on his face. After a long while he asked, "Instructor Mo believed me just like that?" Li Weiran slowly smiled. Of course he wouldn't believe it so easily, so I pointed him to a location and let him check it out himself. Chu Moli slightly narrowed his eyes. Junior sister came from the Yinwu continent, so your so-called location to investigate the truth must be there. Chapter 3571. This world's heavenly Tao rules work from top to bottom. The energy fluctuations decrease and cannot be reversed. Otherwise, there will be a backlash. Killing an emperor is an almost impossible task in the Xiuxian continent, but in the Yinwu continent, it's as easy as turning one's hand. Chu Moli pauses, then continues. I'm afraid that Instructor Mo doesn't know about your scheme, but this matter involves little junior sister and Xiao Bao. Even if he knows that there's a mountain of knives and a sea of fire in front of him, he will still charge forward. Am I right? This time, it's Li Weiran's turn to applaud. You're absolutely right, truly worthy of being. The last few words come out of Li Weiran's mouth, but the meaningful smile on his face doesn't recede. If I didn't know it was impossible, I would almost think that you've been watching me lay out my plans from the side. But there's one thing that I still don't understand. Chu Moli smiles and nods, indicating for him to ask. Logically speaking, you're Jun Mayan's third senior brother, and you also call Di Mingju instructor. In terms of relationship, you should be closer to them. Why are you helping me? Chu Moli's expression is unperturbed. He gently twirls the thumb ring on his hand and warmly says, "Back then, your motherly Qianqian lost her memories and lost her cultivation. It was more or less related to me. Just think of it as me making up for the mistakes of that year." Li Weiran curls his lips, a faint smile on his face. "If I'm not wrong, Chu third young master's age is only in his 20s, and there are no signs of reincarnation. My mother died hundreds of years ago. How is that related to you?" Chu Moli warmly says, "Does our cooperation include me telling you the truth?" "Of course not, I'm just casually asking." Li Weiran smiles faintly and hands a tattered wooden tablet to Chu Moli. "If Chu third young master doesn't want to say it, then forget it. I will naturally complete the transaction that needs to be completed. I hope that Chu third young master will also keep your promise and not forget what you promised me." "Of course." Chu Moli takes the wooden tablet and casually puts it away. He smiles and nods. "I will do as you wish." Once the door is closed, Chu Moli turns to look at his half-finished painting. The corners of his mouth curl up slightly. He picked up the brush and added color and lines to the painting. After a long while, he muttered as if he was talking to himself, "As you wish, Junior sister is going to be sad." Mayan's mood has never been this anxious and fretful. It's been a day and a night since Di Mingju appeared and left. But there was still no news. What did Li Weiran tell him that day? Why did Di Mingju disappear, without even the slightest explanation? Mu Yan really wants to go out and look for him, but Xiao Bao is still at the critical moment of life and death for his bloodline awakening. This was the third day of his awakening. According to the ancient books, as long as he could endure through today, he would be able to survive. The success rate of Xiao Bao's awakening would increase to 80%. Mu Yan's heart ached as she looked at Xiao Bao, who had his eyes tightly closed and a pained expression on his face. She wiped the sweat from his body with a cloth towel over and over again. She was so focused and pitiful that she didn't notice. In the yard outside her room, Chu Moli was currently throwing one painting after another at the corresponding positions of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams. The last painting fell to the northeast corner. Wisps of black gas suddenly seep out from the ground in the middle of the yard. As the black gas increases, the originally hard bluestone ground unexpectedly seems to have melted, and it starts to roll and ripple. Chapter 3572. Then, one head after another popped out from the center of the churning black water. Only after 10 people had emerged did the churning black water calm down. The black qi dissipated, and the ground returned to its original state of bluestone. The entire courtyard returned to its original state of tranquility. The first one to emerge was a haggard old man with long arms and legs. The teleportation just now made him look a little weak, and there was still a faint trace of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. However, he didn't even bother to wipe it. He immediately turned around and looked at Chu Moli. "May I ask where the person master wants us to take away is?" At this moment, Chu Moli's complexion is also indescribably pale. He slightly hangs his head and points his finger in the direction of Mayan's room. Bang! The door was kicked open. Mu Yan looks up and sees the uninvited strangers. She frowns. "Who are you people?" The complexion of the long-limbed old man was much better now. He took a step forward, bowed slightly, and said respectfully, "I'm Tian Ho of the Longhand clan. I'm here to take you and the young master to the Xiaoxian continent. Miss June, please come with us as soon as possible." Mayan stands up, her face full of vigilance as she looks at the few people coldly saying, "What, Darren? I don't know you." Tian Wu's wrinkled face twitched as he spat out 3 words. "Li Weiran." "Li Weiran." Mu Yan's face darkens. "What if I don't go?" Tian Ho looked at her quietly, his expression still respectful. "His Excellency instructed us not to harm Miss June and the young master no matter what. But if you insist on resisting and not coming with us, we will also take special measures to make you lose the ability to resist first." Mayan raises her hand, and the 7 Absolutes sword appears in her palm. In her entire life, she had never been threatened by anyone. "In that case, let's see if you have the ability to make me lose the ability to resist." Even Tian Ho's expression changed when he saw the 7 Absolute swords. His eyes were filled with vigilance and suspicion. However, it was only for a moment before a smile appeared on his wrinkled face. That's right, this old servant also remembered something. Lordly asked me to tell you that if you don't come with us, I'm afraid you won't be able to see the Emperor one last time. What did you say? Mayan's face suddenly changes color as she thinks of Di Mingju, who she hasn't heard from. His heart felt like it was being roasted on fire. Could it be that Di Mingju is really in danger? Otherwise, why didn't he come back to see her for such a long time? However, even if her heart is on fire, Mayan's face only has a calm that no one can see through. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. Li Weiran? You want to catch Di Mingju on your own? Isn't that too much of a daydream? Tianhe wasn't angry at being ridiculed like this. Instead, he revealed a mysterious smile. It seems that Miss June is unwilling to obediently follow us. Miss June, please forgive us if we were to injure you. After all, Lord Li had repeatedly instructed us to respectfully invite you back. Mu Yan glanced at Xiaobao behind her. She originally wanted to put him back into the space. However, he thought that if he were to get injured in the fight later, it might affect him. Thus, he threw out a formation plate to protect Xiaobao. Swish, 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 swish. The 7 child swords fly out and float behind Mayan. The Tian Emochin flips over and floats to the left. Her fair fingers lightly pluck the strings, producing a melodious zither sound. Chapter 3573. She's clearly just a young girl in her early 20s, and her cultivation hasn't even reached the peak of golden immortal. But looking at the 7 transparent swords that emit different rays of light, listening to the sound of the zither echoing in the room, Tianhe and the others have an inexplicable feeling of being suppressed in their hearts. His eyes sink, and he slowly takes a step forward. Miss June, you don't know what's good for you. It's really difficult for me. A powerful pressure is suddenly released, making Mu Yan's face turn white. Her internal organs tumble, and she almost spits out blood. The Tian Emochin makes a series of chaotic sounds under this pressure. It can no longer assist as effectively as before. At this moment, Mu Yan feels that she's an ant poured by Tianhe. In the face of absolute power and level suppression, there's no trace of resistance. The arms of the long-handed clan are more than twice as long as those of ordinary people. Tianhe doesn't do anything. He just slowly reaches out and grabs Mu Yan. The 7 absolute swords fly out to resist, but they're slapped down the moment they touch the long hand. The withered palm is about to cover Mu Yan's palm. Suddenly bang! Tianhe feels a sharp pain in his back, followed by a bone-chilling energy pouring into his body. Puff! He violently spits out a mouthful of blood, trying to operate his immortal force to stabilize his turbulent internal breath. But he feels a burst of tearing pain in his internal organs, and a black line begins to appear on the withered palm. It spreads all the way up his arm, and in just a few breaths, it's already close to his heart. Miss June, are you all right? Mu Yan hasn't reacted to what's happening. She sees a kind old man respectfully saluting her, confirming that she's safe and sound. Only then does he let out a long sigh of relief. Mu Yan is confused. May I ask who you are? I'm Chang Ying, an elder of the polar domain. Elder Chang's eyes are gentle, looking up and down at Mu Yan. The admiration and intimacy in his eyes are overflowing. I've heard Jun Shang and the little master mention you, and today I'm finally fortunate to see you in person. Chang Ying, why are you here? Mu Yan hasn't had time to digest these twists and turns in Elder Chang's identity when she hears Tianhe's incredulous roar behind her. Elder Chang turns to look at him and says unhappily, If you can come, why can't we? If I don't come, could it be that I'll let you take away my polar domain's honorable divine empress? As he spoke, Tianhe's subordinates had all fallen to the ground unconscious. Moreover, their faces were covered in black qi, and their lips were purple. It was obvious that he had been poisoned. Tianhe's face twisted fiercely. That's impossible. If you came to the floating island through the universe mirror, there's no way we wouldn't know. Elder Chang stroked his beard and sneered. Who said we came through the mirror of heaven and earth? Then how did you come to the floating island unharmed? Tianhe's questioning voice suddenly paused. His horrified gaze slowly turned to the door. There, Chu Moli, who had a pale complexion and a gentle expression, resembling a weak scholar, was currently being pushed by Qin Jiao into the room. Tian Ho's eyes widened. It's you? You used the 10,000 will curse to teleport them here? Why? Chu Moli calmly said. It's not easy for me to set up the 10,000 wheels curse. Wouldn't it be a loss if I only used it to transport the few of you? Are you crazy? Tian Ho's voice suddenly rose, his eyes filled with intense hatred and anger. Chapter 3574. The polar domain hates people who use curse the most. No, the entire Xiaoxian continent will not allow people who use curse to exist. You exposed your identity as a curse warrior. Yet you still rely on the polar domain. Aren't you courting death? How could that be? Chu Moli smiles faintly. Don't you know that the polar domain's sovereign is my Xiaoyaosek's son-in-law? I have such a thick golden thigh to hug. What's there to worry about? Cough, cough, cough. Elder Chang almost chokes to death on his own saliva. Son-in-law, what the hell? There Jun Shang is the dignified polar domain's sovereign. How? How could he marry into the Xiaorao sect? Don't even think about it. Even Mu Yin can't help but facepalm. She actually doesn't understand what her third brother is doing. How could Li Weiron's subordinates get involved with third brother? But there's one thing she's sure of. In this world, she hasn't met a more abnormal, more black-bellied, more calculating person than third brother. Tian Ho takes a deep breath, slowly calming down. He glances at the black line on his body that's about to reach his heart. He can't help but reveal a bitter smile. It turned out to be the soul-snatching soul, refined by the sacred ancestor medicine king. No wonder I didn't even have the chance to use the curse. But do you think you've won just like that? Tian Ho suddenly laughs faintly, his expression malevolent and deranged. Do you really think that Di Mingju can still come back from the Yinwu continent alive? No, he won't survive. Everything that happened today, Li Darren has already calculated it for hundreds of years. In the Yinwu continent, every game, every step, is a killing move to put Di Mingju to death. Even if he knew beforehand, so what? He still can't escape the fate of certain death. As soon as his voice falls, the black line on Tian Ho's body finally spreads to his heart. There's a loud bang, and he screams, falling stiffly to the ground. His round eyes don't have much fear and pain from dying in peace, only crazed hatred. The world is filthy, the sins of generations. There will be a day when a raging flame will burn everything in the world, letting everything return to ashes, earth to earth. Everyone will pay for their sins. Ha ha ha. No one can escape, no one. Ha ha ha. A ball of blue flame sprang up from his heart, instantly burning his 3 souls and 7 mortal forms into nothingness. The culprit has been executed, but there's no way for Mayan to feel at ease. Did he just say that Di Mingju is in the Yinwu continent? What's going on? Elder Chang is also deeply worried, but when he hears Mayan's question, he still squeezes out a smile. Miss June, don't worry. With Jun Shang's cultivation and strength, as well as the fact that he has already taken precautions, nothing will happen. Mayan frowns. I ask you, what is he doing in the Yinwu continent? Elder Chang's forehead was covered in sweat, although Jun Shang didn't explicitly say what he's going to do in the Yinwu continent. However, Elder Chang had roughly guessed it, because his family has always been cold and aloof, never disdaining to explain, and never hesitating. Jun Shang Darren. Before entering the Qingquan mirror, she unexpectedly asks him with a slightly perplexed tone. If Ben Jun kills Xiao Bao's biological father, Mayan will. Di Mingju doesn't say the last sentence, but Elder Chang understands at once. Jun Shang's trip to the Yinwu continent this time is related to Xiao Bao's life experience. Then he sees the perplexed look on Di Mingju's face recede, replaced by an ice-cold murderous intent. Chapter 3575. No, she will never know. Xiao Bao's biological father is already dead. She only needs to remember this. In that case, Mayan could only be his wife. I will never leave. Elder Chang's heart skipped a beat. He knows that Di Mingju is determined to kill Xiao Bao's biological father. He wanted to stop her, but in the end, He swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. What kind of days did Junshang lead as a child? Later on, he was so cold-hearted that he bound himself in an ice-cold shell, not allowing himself to have any feelings. Elder Chang had been watching them along the way. Junshang has finally found his own happiness, and is living more and more like a normal person. How could he bear to let others destroy it? But now that Mayan has asked, Elder Chang is flustered. What was he supposed to say? Is Di Mingju going to kill your child's biological father? With this thought in mind, Elder Chang turned his gaze to Xiaobao, who was lying on the bed with a high fever and sleeping. What happened to little master? You seem to be in a lot of pain. As he spoke, he hurriedly walked towards the bed. Half of it is because she's really worried, and the other half is because she wants to change the topic, so that Mayan won't ask about Di Mingju's whereabouts again. However, just as he walked to the bedside, his divine sense probed Xiaobao's body, and his eyes suddenly widened. Li Fire bloodline awakening? How is this possible? In the polar domain, Elder Chang's qualifications were very high, but his strength could only be considered average. This time, the reason why Di Mingju ordered him to come and protect Mu Yan and Xiaobao. Most importantly, he has the divine spirit tranquilizer pill that Han Chujiu gave him. Li Weiran, as well as the mysterious organization that Mu Luyan was in, were all experts in using poison and curses. On the floating island, a place where the heavenly Tao's laws couldn't completely protect, these despicable methods can unleash a power that is 100 times stronger than that of the Xiuxian continent. Even if Ing Mei and Han Ye's cultivation is higher than Elder Chang's, in the face of these curse, they still don't have the power to resist. On the other hand, Elder Chang's spiritual mind suppression pill could resist the power of the curse to a certain extent. As for ordinary poisons, they would be completely immune to the spiritual mind suppressing pill. However, Elder Chang would never have expected this. It was a freak coincidence that he came to the floating island this time. Li Fire bloodline. Even in the polar domain's royal family, only the direct descendants of the Mahists could inherit this bloodline. Not to mention the possibility of awakening after receiving the inheritance. Therefore, in the entire polar domain, the only person who truly knew what the symptoms of the Li Fire bloodline awakening were, and what kind of energy fluctuations there were, was Elder Chang. Even Di Mingju, he has awakened the Li Fire bloodline. But at that time, Junshang was still too young, and because there was no one to look after him, he suffered a lot. However, he remained unconscious and unable to wake up. In fact, he had no idea what was going on with the bloodline awakening. However, Elder Chang knew very well. He could confirm it almost as soon as he saw Xiaobao. He was experiencing the awakening of his Li Fire bloodline. Hearing Elder Chang's words, Mayan doesn't have the time to ask about Di Mingju's condition. She suddenly widens her eyes. She grabbed Elder Chang's hand and suppressed her excitement. Elder Chang, you know about the Li Fire bloodline? Chapter 3576. Glorious Sun Swallowing Heaven, Li Fire 9 Luminaries. Only with the Li Fire bloodline could there be a glorious sun swallowing heaven. This was publicly acknowledged under the heavens, that only the polar domain's imperial family could possess this bloodline. The little master is clearly not Junshang's biological son. How could he have inherited the Li Fire bloodline that only the direct descendants of the Mo clan had? Elder Chang felt that his mind was in a mess. Thousands of strands of thoughts were tangled into one ball after another. There were many details and coincidences that he had never paid attention to before. At this moment, they appeared in front of him one after another. The blood knot totem was something that was extremely difficult to succeed with, but Junshang and the little master succeeded in one try. There aren't many people in the three realms who have ice blue pupils, but Junshang and the little master have a pair of eyes that are almost exactly the same. Also, when the little master and Junshang appeared together in the hidden abyss, almost no one doubted that the little master and Junshang weren't biological father and son. Elder Chang had never cared about all of this in the past. But at this moment, if one were to think about it, they would all point to the same conclusion. But how could this be possible? Jun Shang has clearly never been to the Yinwu continent before, nor has he mentioned having skin contact with any woman. With Jun Shang's infatuation with Miss June, if he had known earlier that the two of them had a child, it was good enough that he didn't tie her up to get married. How could he have left them behind for so many years and not cared about them? No, that's impossible. Elder Chang shook his head vigorously in fear. But if it wasn't Jun Shang, then who could it be? Could it be that there was a second person in the world who had inherited the Li Fire bloodline? Elder Chang, Elder Chang? When Mu Yan saw that Elder Chang was in a daze, as if he had lost his soul, and was staring fixedly at Xiaobao, she couldn't help but panic in her heart. Is Xiaobao in danger? Is the Li Fire bloodline really unable to endure it alone? No, how could that be? That year you... Halfway through his sentence, Elder Chang quickly shut his mouth. Things were not clear yet, so he could not speak carelessly. Elder Chang took a deep breath and said, "Don't worry, Miss June Little Master's condition is very good now. It's not like the Li Fire bloodline can't withstand it alone. With Little Master's willpower and talent, the first awakening shouldn't be a problem." Hearing Elder Chang's words, Mu Yan breathed a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as he could get through it. If something really happens to Xiaobao, Mu Yan doesn't know what she will do. Perhaps she would search to the ends of the earth to find the man who had brought Xiaobao into the world and made him suffer for 2 lifetimes. He would chop him into pieces and bury him with Xiaobao. That Miss June, Elder Chang asked cautiously, "May I ask, who exactly is Xiaobao's biological father?" He paused and then said with difficulty, "This old man heard Jun Shang say that you loved Xiaobao's father very much. It's just that he died young, causing you two to be separated by life and death. You still miss him, don't you?" Mu Yan rubbed her forehead, feeling speechless. What the fuck? Back then he had told a lie. And now, it was like a rolling snowball, getting bigger and bigger. Originally, she wanted to personally tell Di Mingju about this matter. But he didn't know why he couldn't say it out loud every time. Mu Yan hesitated for a while before saying softly, "Elder Chang, to tell you the truth, I don't know who Xiaobao's biological father is." "What?" Elder Chang's eyes widened in shock. "Kiki, didn't you tell Jun Shang that you loved Xiaobao's biological father very much?" Chapter 3577. Mayan touches her nose, awkwardly saying, "At first, I thought that Di Mingju was annoying, so I deliberately said that, wanting him to know when to retreat. Who knew? Who knew that man? He was clearly the Polar Domain's sovereign emperor, a king who stood at the peak of all living beings. However, he was unswerving in love with her, a broken flower, whose heart belonged to someone else. In the end, she chose to face her heart and stay with him for a long time. However, this lie from back then had missed the best time to explain itself. Whenever Mu Yan recalls Di Mingju's jealous appearance, she can't help but find it funny. She smiles helplessly. Her line of sight seems to be looking at that man in a faraway world. Actually, I've wanted to tell him for a long time. There's only one man that Mayan has ever loved in this life, and that's Di Mingju. I don't have a dead husband, and I don't have anyone I love more than anyone else, because from the beginning to the end, I only love him." Mr. Chang blinked his eyes in a daze. You don't know who Xiaobao's biological father is? What's going on?" Mayan restrains the gentleness and smile on her face, and her expression turns ice cold in a split second. She didn't want to talk about the past, but she was afraid that Elder Chang would misunderstand, so she gave a simple explanation. "I was young then, and I was tricked into a nameless valley. I was drugged, and in a daze I entered a cave. The cave was dark. I couldn't see the man's face clearly, and I couldn't remember what had happened during that time. After I left the cave, I discovered that I was pregnant with Xiaobao. In the cave, the man whose face could not be seen clearly had passed on the Li Fire bloodline to Little Mistress." At this moment, Elder Chang's mind was a mess, and he felt as if hundreds of claws were scratching at his heart. He feels that he must see Jun Shang immediately and tell him about this matter. As for that cave, he had to investigate it thoroughly. Mr. Chang suppressed his excitement and nervousness and asked, "Miss June, don't you want to find out who the father of the young master is?" Mayan says with an expressionless face. I originally didn't want to. I was afraid that if I saw someone, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from castrating him. After all, he's Xiaobao's biological father. It won't be good if he finds out when he grows up. Elder Chang shuddered, and suddenly felt a cold pain in a certain part of his body. Oh, I feel sorry for Jun Shang. But now that little Bao's Li fire bloodline has awakened, if he has the protection of an elder, perhaps he won't have to work so hard. Mu Yan looked at Elder Chang. If possible, could you ask the polar domain to help me investigate the people who possess the Li fire bloodline? Elder Chang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Yes. Of course you can. The polar domain will not shirk its duty. Mu Yan feels that Elder Chang's expression is a little unsightly. She was about to express her concern. Suddenly, the void spirit ring on his finger shone with a dazzling light. Immediately after, Mu Yan feels as if all the strength in her body has been sucked out. Her legs went soft, and she sat down on the bed. What's going on? 7 brilliance cried out from within the space. Why are your life force and soul primordial energy flowing away? Jun Mayan, quickly take off the ring on your finger. Impossible. Mu Yan's face was deathly pale, but his fingers were tightly gripping the ring on his ring finger, as if he wanted to embed it into his own flesh and blood. Miss Jun, what's wrong? Why do you look so pale? The void spirit ring stopped drawing soul power from her body. It's like someone had forcibly cut off that connection. The error-free chapter of Alluring Enchantress of the Magic Doctor, Heaven-Defying Baby's Black-Bellied Father, will continue to be updated on Handplay Bar. There are no advertisements on the site. Everyone, please collect and recommend Handplay Bar. If you like, Alluring Enchantress of the Magic Doctor, Heaven-Defying Baby's Black-Bellied Father, please collect. Chapter 3578. The dazzling void spirit ring stopped shining and became as dim as an ordinary iron ring. Mayan's deathly pale complexion gradually recovers. However, not only did she not feel at ease, but she was also burning with anxiety. The void spirit ring is the life shared between her and Di Mingju. Previously, there were several times when she was on the verge of danger. In the moments of imminent peril, it was always Di Mingju who gave her the divine essence, allowing her to get through the crisis. Just now, the void spirit ring had suddenly lit up and extracted soul essence from her body. This shows that Di Mingju is definitely in danger. But this kind of drawing was about to end. That's not because Di Mingju is out of danger, but because he forcibly severed the connection. Mu Yan took a deep breath and looked at the worried Elder Chang. I have some matters that I need to attend to. Could you please look after Xiaobao for me? Elder Chang hesitated for a moment. He actually wants to immediately return to the polar domain and tell Jun Shang about today's discovery. But right now Little Master was the most important. If the young master couldn't endure the bloodline awakening, or if something happened to her, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, Elder Chang immediately nodded his head solemnly. Don't worry, Miss Jun. Even if I die, I will protect Little Master. I won't let anyone lay a finger on him. Mu Yan walked out of the room and gently rotated the void spirit ring on her finger. Tian Wu just said that Di Mingju is in the Yinwu continent. But how was she going to get there? Junior sister, do you want to experience the 10,000 wheel curse? Hearing the familiar voice, Mu Yan raises her head and meets Chu Moli's gentle and light smiling eyes. Third senior brother Yu. In the courtyard, the scrolls that were thrown everywhere were burning, but they were not burned to ashes. In the center of the courtyard, the green stone ground had once again turned into rolling black water. It made people feel as if they had stepped into an endless hell once they stepped inside. Chu Moli's complexion is even uglier than Mu Yan's. There wasn't even a trace of blood on his thin lips, but his pitch-black eyes were shining with light. It was like the hope in the endless darkness. It was weak, but it never dissipated. Mu Yan takes a deep breath and slowly walks into the churning black water. In an instant, an indescribable feeling of suffocation assaulted him. Mu Yan couldn't describe that feeling. It was as if all the negative emotions in the world, hatred, disgust, sorrow, pain, numbness, and greed, were pouring into her body, almost bursting her. She could faintly hear Chu Moli's soft murmur. Li Weiran, I also want to fulfill your wish. But not everyone can bully the people of the Xiaoyao sect. Yinwu Continent Fog Forest. Star Wolf cautiously follows behind Di Mingju. Looking at his slender and ramrod straight back, she felt uneasy. Junshang, where are we going? There's no expression on Di Mingju's face. He just coldly looks at him. Didn't I tell you to go back to the Xiaoxian continent first? How can this be? Star Wolf said anxiously. Knowing that someone is plotting against Lord, how can this subordinate not protect him? What's more, this subordinate's cultivation method is different from Han Ye's and Ying Mei's. Even Curse might not necessarily be able to do anything to this subordinate. Junshang, let this subordinate stay by your side to protect you. Di Mingju didn't say anything else. With an indifferent expression, he walks step by step through the fog forest. In fact, with his cultivation, even in the Yinwu continent, it would be as easy as turning over his hand if he wanted to shrink the earth to inches. But Di Mingju keeps walking step by step like that. Chapter 3579. It seems to be very fast, and his heart is full of anxiety. It also seems that his footsteps are heavy and dragging, and he only hopes that he will never reach his destination in this lifetime. A low and guilty voice vaguely rings in his mind. As a father, I didn't take good care of Yen'er. I never thought that I would marry such a ruthless and vicious woman. Not only did she almost kill my own son, but she also let Yen'er suffer such humiliation and pain. The speaker is Mu Yan's adoptive father Shenicheng. With the help of the molding spirit pill that Mu Yan left behind, the majority of the Nether Flame army ascended to the Xiaoxian continent, including Mu Yan's brother Shen Jinglin. But because the adoptive father Shenicheng was too old and had average talent, he ultimately failed to ascend and stayed in the Yinwu continent. In the past, Di Mingju was extremely repulsed by the identity of Xiao Bao's biological father. He was insanely jealous of the man whom Mu Yan deeply loved, jealous of the blood bond between him and Xiao Bao. So after Mu Yan agreed to be with him, Di Mingju made this person a taboo. He didn't want to investigate Mu Yan's past, and he didn't allow anyone to mention it. Even if Mu Yan had already promised to stay with him forever, Di Mingju's heart has always had a strong unease. Is the man who once had Mu Yan really dead? If he appeared one day, would Mu Yan abandon him and throw herself into his arms again? If that happened, he would go crazy. He would definitely not be able to stop himself from killing this man. He would even break Mu Yan's wings, so that she could only stay by his side. Di Mingju couldn't imagine this day coming, so he simply deceived himself and forced himself to forget everything. However, it wasn't until today that he knew what he had missed. The hands hanging at his sides tightly clench into fists. Blood drips down from the gaps of his fingers. But he didn't notice it at all. It turns out that there has never been a man whom she deeply loved. There was only the young and helpless Mu Yan, who was schemed against, bullied, and pushed into an endless abyss. And he, because of jealousy and unease, buried his head like an ostrich, so that he didn't know anything. Yen'er told you that she deeply loved Xiao Bao's father? Shenicheng shows a surprised expression when he hears Di Mingju's question. How is that possible? Yen'er hates the man who humiliated her so much. At that time, Yen'er had yet to reach marriageable age. She was such a young child, yet she was forced to bear a premarital pregnancy. She had to bear the scorn and ridicule of the people around her. Although she loves Xiao Bao very much, she doesn't say a word about that man. Please believe me, Yen'er has never liked another man in her entire life. The only man she brought back to the Shun family and solemnly introduced to me and Jinglin is you. As for that bastard, which good girl would fall in love with him after being forced? Yen'er probably hated him to the bone all this time, but she didn't show it because of Xiao Bao. Not to mention that so many years had passed, that bastard might already be dead. Junshang, you don't have to take it to heart. In the future, please treat Yen'er well. You don't know that this child has suffered a lot. It's just that he's stubborn by nature and doesn't want anyone to know. Di Mingju closes his eyes. Every time he recalls Shenicheng's words, his heart aches as if it's struggling. But even so, he couldn't help but recall it over and over again, torturing himself. Chapter 3580. He never knew that the girl that he cherishes and cherishes, that he could not wait to give her the best of everything in the world, that she actually suffered such humiliation and pain in a place that he doesn't know. Jun Shang. Behind him, Xinglang suddenly discovers that there's blood flowing down his body. He screams in fright and rushes forward. Jun Shang, are you hurt? Shut up. Di Mingju's cold words make Xinglang instantly keep quiet out of fear. But the worry in his eyes is so thick that it can't be dispersed. Because there's something wrong with Jun Shang right now. His eyes are crimson, as if a storm is brewing in the depths of his eyes. The air pressure around him curls and tumbles, painstakingly suppressed. But if he's not careful, it will explode out, blowing up this world, and even him into pieces. Xinglang wants to speak again. Suddenly, he finds a flash of light in front of him. The dense forest that was originally shrouded in thick fog suddenly disappeared. What appears in front of them is a small valley. There's nothing in this valley. It's probably because of the winter. But the ground is bare. Not even a blade of grass can be seen. Not far away from the two, at the end of this small valley there's a cave. The moment he sees this cave, Xinglang feels that the air pressure around Jun Shang has changed again. Bone-chilling cold. A murderous aura. But there's also a hint of faintly discernible fear and pain. The coordinates that Li Weiren gave is here. Back then, Mu Yan mistakenly entered this cave. That's why Di Mingju suddenly closes his eyes, forcing himself not to imagine that scene. Otherwise, he won't be able to stop himself from destroying everything in front of him. After a long time, he takes a step forward, heading towards the cave. Xinglang stares blankly and promptly clenches the ice around his waist, hurrying to catch up. He feels that he's stepping on something. Xinglang's steps stop, and he subconsciously bends down to look. Only then does he discover that the thing that just stepped on his foot is half exposed. It turns out to be a bamboo tube. Someone must have accidentally left it here, right? Xinglang isn't the least bit interested in the things left behind by the mortals of the Yinwu continent. He doesn't bother to take another look, and gets up to catch up. However, he suddenly catches a flash of light from the corner of his eyes. This light is really coming from the bamboo tube. This is? Xinglang raised his head and shouted. Ruler, please come over and take a look. As he spoke, he quickly dug up the bamboo tube buried in the soil. Di Mingju stops and looks over. He promptly takes 3 steps and 2 steps, bringing the thing in front of Di Mingju. Jun Shang, please take a look. Isn't this the symbol of my polar domain? Furthermore, there is a sealing barrier around this bamboo tube. Di Mingju takes the bamboo tube. Almost as soon as he touches it, his eyes sink. This was left behind by Pajun. What? Star Wolf said in disbelief. Defeating armies came here before? What is he doing here? During this period of time, defeating armies had disappeared without a trace, but it didn't cause any reaction in the polar domain. This was because defeating armies had always been elusive. He can follow behind Di Mingju like a shadow for 10 years without showing himself. On top of that, his cultivation was extremely high, so no one could detect his presence. So much so that after such a long time, everyone still thinks that defeating armies is still hiding somewhere by Di Mingju's side, silently guarding. Only a very small number of people know that as early as a few months ago, defeating armies had asked Di Mingju for a leave to leave for a period of time. Chapter 3581. Only now did Di Mingju remember. Before defeating armies left, he did say that he would go to the Yinwu continent to investigate some things. So this was where defeating armies came from. But how did he know about this place? What are you here to investigate? Di Mingju's eyes droop as he looks at the bamboo tube in his hand. A dark blue rune mark immediately appeared on the bamboo tube. Seeing this symbol, Star Wolf's eyes suddenly widened. Even his breathing quickened. This is the old granny seal. Why would defeating armies use the old granny seal? Mr. Chang clearly said that the seal of the old matron was extremely rare and expensive. He would only leave it behind when he predicted that he would be in danger as his last words. The old granny seal was a magic treasure, and it was a one-time consumable magic treasure that had reached the level of a holy object. Even in the entire polar domain, only a few of Demingju's trusted subordinates and elders have them. As a matter of fact, with the old granny seal, if one day the conditions to trigger the seal were met, the seal would be activated. This bamboo tube will automatically fly into Demingju's hand, even if they are separated by 2 worlds and space barriers. But before that, there was no way to break the seal. Even if it's Demingju, if he wants to forcibly break it open, he might also destroy the bamboo tube and its contents. What had happened to defeating armies that he had to use the motherly witch seal? Star Wolf panted slightly and said, "Defeating armies is definitely fine. The soul lamp he left in the polar domain is still bright. Juanshang, you don't need to worry about him." Demingju puts away the bamboo tube, then turns his gaze towards the cave. "That's right." Star Wolf's eyes brightened. Defeating armies left the item here. He might be inside. "Juanshang, please wait a moment. This subordinate will enter the cave to investigate." He found that defeating armies had left the motherly seal outside the cave. Star Wolf's heart leaped to his throat. Since even defeating armies was so serious about this, it meant that this place was extremely dangerous. Even if this is only the lowest level Yinwu continent. And Star Wolf will absolutely not allow Demingju to easily take risks. Saying that, he doesn't wait for Demingju to react, and already rushes towards the cave. However, just as he reached the entrance of the cave, he felt as if he had crashed into an invisible barrier. Because he was in too much of a hurry, the reaction force was too great. He even sat down on the ground. "Fuck. What's this?" Star Wolf cursed inwardly, shaking his dizzy head as he stood up. "Barrier? Why is there a barrier here?" Even Demingju can't help but frown. He stretched out his hand and touched the barrier. The divine power in his body slowly surged. In the Yinwu continent, everywhere is filled with the aura of desolation. Spiritual energy and immortal energy were almost completely unusable. Even if it's divine power that can move unhindered in the 3 realms, and isn't restricted by the majority of the rules, it can't be used at will in the Yinwu continent. Otherwise, it would cause the heaven and earth's yuan qi to become turbulent, forming a spatial vortex, and even causing the world to collapse. In the end, it would cause the people to be plunged into misery and suffering, and the heavenly Tao would punish them severely. Therefore, Demingju's movement of transferring divine power was extremely slow. As the divine power slowly seeped into the air, water-like ripples began to appear on the barrier outside the cave. The barrier emitted a star-like radiance. They scattered in all directions. For a moment, the previously gray, barren, and lifeless valley seemed to be filled with countless beautiful fireflies. It was so beautiful that it shook one's heart and soul. One would almost think that one was in a fairyland. Chapter 3582. Xinglang looks at this scene in amazement and admiration. He can't help but secretly say, "Juanshang is really amazing. He can still use his divine power as he pleases in the Yinwu continent. Facing such a strange enchantment, he's still able to remain calm. Just now, he's blowing a wave of bootlicking in his mind." Xinglang turns his head, only to find that Demingju's expression is very strange. He also raises his head to look at the light of the broken stars fluttering in the valley. From the initial grave and stern expression, his expression gradually turns into one of bewilderment and nostalgia. "What's wrong with Juanshang?" Demingju blankly stares at the scene in front of him, his brain suddenly churning like a raging storm. There seems to be some dusty, firmly wrapped up memory. At this moment, he suddenly finds an opening to break through, and rushes to rush out. He seems to have seen this kind of scene before. "Don't cry. Don't cry anymore. Ben Jun will give you whatever you want. You said that there are no stars here. Ben Jun will fill the sky with starlight for you, as long as you don't leave. Yinyu, call me Yinyu. Wait for me, I'll come find you." The starlight sprinkles down from the sky. For a moment, it's like the Milky Way falling from the 9th heaven. It's magnificent. But no matter how beautiful it is, how can it be more beautiful than a young girl's bright and beautiful smile? Who is it? Who is it? Why is there such a memory in his mind? Junshang, be careful. In a trance, Di Mingju hears Xinglang's frightened scream. In the next moment, the invisible barrier outside the cave suddenly turns into densely packed runes. Each rune is a glaring blood red. Interweaving together, it's like they're building a red wall. And the divine power that Di Mingju injects is slowly flowing along with these runes. Finally, it converges at the heart of the array. Boom! There's a loud noise and the earth shakes. In the distance, hundreds of beasts in the fog forest flee in all directions in fright, letting out terrified howls. Xinglang only cares about rushing over to protect Di Mingju, but he feels a scorching wave of air hitting his face. He's clearly already cultivated a complete immortal body. Under the scorching heat, he actually feels a severe pain on his skin. His hair makes a sizzling burning sound, and in just a moment, the sparks spread to his scalp. Star Wolf was scared out of his wits. He wanted to escape. He wanted to circulate his immortal energy to resist, but it was already too late. At this moment, an ice-cold aura enveloped his entire body. Then he felt the back of his neck being pulled back. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The tremors in the valley slowly disappeared. Everything returned to normal. Even the roars of the beasts in the dense fog forest disappeared in an instant. If it wasn't for the burning pain on his scalp, he wouldn't have thought of it. Star Wolf almost thought that everything that had happened just now was just an illusion on his part. Is this still the freaking Yimwu continent? How could the Yimwu continent have such a frightening array boundary? If Junshang hadn't saved his life just now, he would have been roasted to death by these raging flames. Just as Xinglang breathes a sigh of relief, he lifts his head to see that Di Mingju's complexion is pale. His sword-like eyebrows were slightly knitted, as if he was suffering from some kind of pain. He asked nervously, Junshang, what's wrong? To be able to stand so well after being hit by the infinite holy curse. His Majesty truly deserves to be the most powerful person in the Xiuxian continent. A laughing voice comes from the fog forest, making all the hairs on Star Wolf's body almost stand on end. Rustle, rustle. Not far away, the trees in the forest gently sway, their branches and leaves rub against each other. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.